What do we make of Craig Berube's press conference at Media Day? And are Brendan Shanahan's days numbered in Toronto? Will he off to the world? So we'll get into all of that and more on today's edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano, and my co-host, Dave Morassutti. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. How's everyone doing today? It's Thursday, and we're still a few days removed from the Maple Leafs Game 7 loss, and we still have a president of hockey operations that is still currently employed, Dave, Brendan Shanahan. But today we could get a little bit more information on his future with the franchise.
Yeah, a couple of reports came out today. Chris Johnson reporting that a meeting is being scheduled between the MLSE board and Shanahan, so it probably involves Keith Pelly, probably a few of the people who represent the ownership group. That's scheduled for today and Thursday as you're listening to this. And then we got the bomb from a few people, but Freeman also confirmed that the New York Islanders, this is a report we heard earlier, but was confirmed today pretty much that the Islanders were given permission to speak to Brendan Shanahan about their current opening at the president of hockey ops.
That's pretty significant to me. Yep. I mean, if you had full intentions on bringing Brendan Shanahan back, you probably don't grant permission. Like, it's one thing for them to ask if they could interview Brendan Shanahan, but for the Maple Leafs to give them permission, I mean, that tells me all I need to know. It doesn't sound like the Maple Leafs are willing to extend Shanahan. His contract's up at the end of the year. They could probably just let him walk, and he can go and sign on, kind of pull a little Lou Lamoriello situation, go from Toronto over to the island, over to the dark, the dark side, and kind of the Maple Leafs will just wipe their hands clean of the Shanahan and the Shanahan era. That to me is more telling than anything. It sounds like his days are going to be numbered here. And tomorrow, formality, and then within 24 hours, maybe even later tonight, could potentially hear that the Maple Leafs and Brendan Shanahan will be parting ways. That's my official guess on what happens here.
Yeah, this is essentially the easiest way you can kind of shift course with Shanahan. You don't have to pretty much let him go. You just all right, this team wants him, we'll let him have him, right? And they don't have to make the tough decision. Well, there is a bit of a tough decision because you could actually try to fight to keep him. Yeah, but I think the fact that Shanahan, like Brendan Shanahan, has to look into this opportunity as well because he might be out of a job,
right?
Right. But as a lot of we've heard is also like Shanahan has big ties with New York. Like he lived there, even though he was, the Leafs president. And also got some people kind of irked a little bit that the president of hockey ops didn't always reside in Toronto, and he spent a lot of his time in New York. So it wasn't surprising to hear that. But yeah, I think, for all parties involved, this might be the easiest way to split rather than having the Leafs have to actually make the tough choice saying, yeah, we're just going to let you go and good luck. Now they can kind of say, well, there's this opportunity for him. Might as well let him have it. Might as well let him take it.
Yeah. It is an easy way out, I guess, of the situation. But ultimately, MLSE should look at it, and the New York Islanders' interest in him should not factor at all into their decision. They should know whether or not they want to keep Shanny in the fold, or if they want to move on. And after 9 years of failure, after the Shannon plan, we will. Well, you didn't. And it cost Kyle his job. It cost Sheldon his job. The last domino to fall, the Shannon plan. is Brendan Shanahan himself. And I'd imagine over the next 48 hours, I think the end of his time here in Toronto is soon coming as well. Also, in the report from Chris Johnston that he wrote on The Athletic, he did also mention that if Shanahan is no longer the president of hockey operations for the Maple Leafs, sounds like they're going to be in no hurry to replace him, and they'll just go with Pelly. Keith Pelly will kind of be the head of the snake, and Treliving's going to report straight to Pelly, and that'll kind of be how it's going to work out, which is interesting because that's kind of what Kyle Dubas wanted all along. Didn't want the middleman, and now it looks like Treliving's going to get that opportunity.
Yeah, it's kind of the irony of that is quite telling. But I think, look, I mean, you've got Brad Treliving, who has spent a long time. Like you don't have a guy who's new to the job, and you like, oh, now we got to like look and find somebody to take on this role. You don't. A lot of teams, even MLSE have kind of taken upon themselves to not have as many presidents in certain roles. Like we heard that MSI Ujiri, they were not everyone was convinced to bring him back. They were just going to go without a president, make Bobby Webster kind of the head honcho guy. Mm-hmm. So I think what this kind of signifies is that they'll go and find the right person if they feel they need it. I think if you're the Leafs, if you don't have a president, and if Treliving has to kind of always go through somebody, maybe that's one thing. But I think you're at a point in time where you can kind of just you can go with Treliving for the next bit, because I'm sure he's fully capable of handling whatever needs to be done.
Yeah, and it also just streamlines hockey decisions, yep. Right? Without that middleman in between with the president, you can take it straight to the board, take it straight to Pelly, and be able to plead your case if you are Brad Treliving. So we'll see what ends up happening here, and if it's a good move, a bad move. But I would imagine, again, there's a meeting being held today on Thursday with Brendan Shanahan and the MLSE board. I would think this is where we get our answer as to what his future at the franchise is going to be. And I don't think it's going to be a very long and prosperous one. I think that he's pretty well out the door at this point, and them granting permission for other teams to interview him kind of tells me all I need to know about that. He's not the only Maple Leafs, off-ice personnel that other teams are inquiring about. There's a potential coaching staff poaching in the mix. We'll tell you about that. William Nylander heads to the World Championship, and what did Coach Craig Berube have to say about the season? That and more coming up next here in the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NHL playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before face-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. Which players are showing up in the biggest moments? How can you track their trends to help you build your next bet? If you've got a read on who's heating up, why not back it up with a same game parlay? New to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com, place your first $5 bet, and if it wins, you get $200 in bonus bets. That's $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the Locked On Network. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano, Dave Morassutti with you on a Thursday. We are here each and every weekday, Monday through Friday, free and available. You can find the Locked On Leafs podcast wherever you get your podcasts at, and also up on YouTube. If you enjoy the content, just keep in mind we'll be going all off season long. That's through the draft, through free agency, and all summer long, all the way until we get back into the mix for training camp. And it's going to be a bumpy ride of a summer. Lots of moving parts, I would imagine. And we'll be here to break it all down every single day on the Locked On Leafs podcast. So make sure that you are subscribed if you want to be locked into what's going on with the Maple Leafs on a daily basis all off season. All right. Speaking of moving parts, there are a couple of things. Brendan Shanahan is one, could potentially be on his way out. We already know Mitch Marner, another potential moving part. John Tavares, go check out yesterday's episode. We dove pretty deep into those two and the futures of them here in Toronto. So go check out yesterday's episode for that. But another person who today we found out could potentially be on his way out of Toronto, assistant coach Lane Lambert, garnering some interest around the league for some vacant head coaching positions. What do you make of that, Dave?
Not surprised. Lane Lambert was highly regarded when he was brought into Toronto because he was a the head coach of the Islanders, and he had he's been well regarded. I remember when they brought him as an assistant, there was a lot of positive things that were brought up, and how he would kind of be the guy that would fill in like the X's and O's for Berube, right? Handle a lot of that stuff. So, but he's going to have some competition, right? I heard like David Quinn was one guy, Mitch Love was somebody else. I think that Drager had Darren Drager was the one, by the way, who reported. Let's give him a little kudos on that one. But the Kraken, they also like former Leafs assistant coaches,
right? Dave Haxtell.
They have a type.
Yeah. I mean, Dave Haxtell's, I think, the only one, but that's half of their head coaches in franchise history.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, Lane Lambert, Lane Lambert showed years ago to the New York Islanders that they felt at least that he was going to be a good coach in the NHL, to the point where they literally let Barry Trotz go. Like if you recall, like he ended up winning, won a Stanley Cup with Washington, and then goes to the island and has 4 great years, takes him to an Eastern Conference final. And then they say, you know what? We don't want someone else to hire Lane Lambert to be a longtime head coach in the NHL. We're not going to bring it back, Barry, and we're going to let Lane Lambert be our coach. And Barry Trotz goes back to Nashville, and now he's the GM there. But it didn't last very long. He got fired, I think it was 2 years or a season and a half almost. And then they decided to bring in Patrick Waugh, and now he might have another opportunity to get behind a bench. And thought he did a pretty good job with the Maple Leafs this year. I thought the whole coaching staff, did a pretty good job of getting this Maple Leafs team to buy into the way that Craig Berube wanted to play. So it'll be interesting. Lambert, good assistants on the bench, but if he ends up getting a head coaching position elsewhere, all power to him. The Maple Leafs aren't going to hold assistants back from getting head coaching jobs. That's just not going to be the way that they operate, right? Like, as much as you want to hold him and keep him in the organization, you got to let him go and do bigger and better things if those opportunities are available. So I like the Leafs being kind enough to let Lambert interview. And if they decide to go in a different direction, Lane Lambert sticks around in Toronto, I think the Leafs will be happy about that as well. It did get me thinking about one thing, though, Dave. I just want to get your thoughts on this, and it's really only because he became, I don't know if folk hero is the right term, but he became a focus at points in the playoffs, and at points through the regular season as well. Mark Savard, what did you make of his first year behind the bench as an assistant with the Toronto Maple Leafs, kind of working with the forwards and really being their power play guy mostly? What did you make of Mark Savard? Do you have a grade that you would maybe give him? And I know it's difficult because we don't exactly know how much influence he has on the group and what he can do. But really, when you look, he was supposed to be the difference maker to get this power play cooking, especially come playoff time. Looked like it was working very well in the first couple of games against Ottawa, but then absolutely fell off a cliff since then.
Yeah, like I don't know if maybe I was going to give him like almost like a C plus, just because of the way that the power play kind of fizzled in the playoffs, and it had a tough start to the year. But he also decided to make a big change that other coaches maybe weren't willing to do, and that was doing the 5-man forward unit for the power play rather than trying to stick with Morgan Riley there. I mean, he could have. I think they did at one point tried Ulrich Larson, but not very long. But like, there were times where the power play came through in the playoffs, especially against Ottawa, right? Like, they showed their potential, but then they really did struggle, especially in that Florida series. And it wasn't the power play that ultimately cost them in the end, because especially Game 7, they didn't have a single power play, so you can't point to that. But yeah,
Although
I thought it was
power play was 20% or 10% in that series overall, though. If it would have been nice if they got one in games, 3, 4, 5, 6, like give me one, right? Give me one in one of those games, and maybe the series is different. Maybe it's different if they get one late in game 3, right? They score on one late, and then all of a sudden, they're up 3-0. But yeah, I get you.
The other thing too you have to think about is he didn't have a full arsenal of weapons, like good players, but like your main weapon on that power play is Austin Matthews.
Yes,
he was not 100%.
He was a shell of himself, but I wonder too now if you think about like, okay, Craig Berube has been with the club for a whole year. Mark Savard now been with the club for a whole year. When the coaches get together this offseason, or I'm sure it's been happening right now, like possibly there's meetings today with Brad Treliving to figure out what went wrong, what do they still need to improve upon going into next season. I do wonder if this is finally the time where the Leafs actually decide, okay, if we've got a lot of money this offseason, let's invest it in a power play quarterback. Like we have gone so many years without a bomb from the point, and it has hindered us so much, so often. Like it could open and free things up if we have a threat from the point. Morgan Rielly isn't that, and having 5 forwards, although it had its ups, it also had its downs. I wonder if that becomes a focus this offseason for the Maple Leafs, just to try and get that little edge that they can get on the power play, and it may open things up even more.
I would really like it if they could find a way to find that player, because that power play tends to get very stagnant.
Yes.
Right. So like I'm sure there's a lot of things that they would like to get done this year, but yeah, I would say that getting your power play sorted would be nice. Like I don't know if I don't know if he would be the option, but I look at and I have to see. Oh, he is a UFA. Like with a guy like Dante Fabro, right?
Fabro? I don't necessarily think about Fabro when I think of like
who would you think? Like, are you thinking of who are you thinking of? Because like
I haven't looked at the free agent list. I'll be completely honest. I haven't looked at it yet, but like someone in the ilk of an Evan Bouchard, like someone who could really rip the puck. You know what I mean? Like someone who could take a clap bomb from the point and find a way to get it through traffic or create a rebound, right? Something that makes teams pack the middle, ready to block shots, as opposed to, all right, we can just fray out because Morgan Rielly's not going to shoot this from the point. Mitch Marner wasn't going to shoot from the point. So they could kind of go out and cover the flanks. Whereas if you got a threat, they'll maybe pack the middle ice a little bit more and try and block shots, which could leave Austin open a little bit more at the side of the net. That could leave, William Nylander open down at the bottom of the circle. You know what I mean? So that's sort of what I mean. Or potentially, that just allows rebounds, garbage goals, right? I just think that it would open up a little bit more for this team. They've solely lacked it since like the Brian McCabe days. We've talked about that incessantly. Like Tyson Barrie was supposed to be that guy, didn't really work out. Right. So, again, obviously Evan Bouchard is not available and he's not the player, but someone like that who can, make a difference on a power play. That's something, we've got weeks to look at the free agent market and try and decide, what's the best course of action, who are the players that the Leafs could bring in. And we will certainly be doing that over the course of the next couple of weeks. But right now I'm just thinking big picture. That might be something. If the Maple Leafs do move on from a Mitch Marner, they do move on from a John Tavares, there's money there. Maybe that's what they try and attack, as opposed to like replacing Marner with like another superstar winger. Maybe you bring in, like a second line winger, but like a top pair or a second pair offensive defenseman who could really rock a power play. Like possibly that's a way that you could also add offense to your team, and offense that'll translate in the playoffs. Because think about how many defensive goals the Panthers had in that series, goals from defensemen. And it's not like they were studs, but like Seth Jones was amazing. Seth Jones is available. Like at one, like he was available. Toronto could have went and made a push and a pitch to get Seth Jones, and they didn't. Florida did, and ultimately he was one of the best players on the ice in Game 7. I think we did 3-point night in Game 7, almost 4. Had a goal taken back. Like he was excellent. Speaking of Game 7, Dave, let's come back and let's get into Craig Berube's comments, because he finally had a chance to reflect on Game 7, what he thought went wrong with the Maple Leafs in this postseason, why their year ended abruptly, and his outlook moving forward, and what he wants to see happen with Mitch Marner and John Tavares. That's all coming up next here in the Locked On Leafs podcast. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano, David Morassutti with you, as we are each and every weekday, Monday through Friday. You can find the Locked On Leafs podcast wherever you get your podcast at. You can also find us on YouTube as well. Hit subscribe and check back each and every day for a brand new episode all the way through the off season. That's drafts, that's the free agency, and even the dog days of summer. We'll still be here providing Leafs content. Craig Berube had a chance to speak yesterday, and we heard what he had to say. Had a chance to finally reflect on Game 7 and speak about, what he thinks the future of this team could or should look like. What were your main takeaways from the head coach yesterday?
It's interesting because after Game 7, he talked about a mindset and how the players didn't have the mindset, and that was like he was like, can't really speak too much else. Like, I really can't explain it other than maybe just mindset. But then he had a lot more of an elaborative detail, in the locker cleaner where he says, well, we got away from our structure in Game 7. It's like, it took you 2 days to realize your team got away from the structure. Like, he tried very hard. And I think he's done this all year long, but especially in that locker room cleanout, to really not throw gasoline on potential fires, right? Like he said, he did a good job making sure and saying it was like the whole team, we didn't play to our structure.
Yeah.
Okay, but what exactly does that mean? Like, where exactly did the team falter not playing to its structure? Was it the top players not playing? Like, no, like he didn't specify it specifically. And I felt like he was holding back quite a bit. It's funny because you see him kind of looking relaxed, or he kind of laughing at certain things. Like, he was trying very hard to not go down the doomsday route that maybe we have somewhere maybe expecting.
Yeah, it's interesting. The buzzword that was used when Craig Berube was brought in to Toronto when he was first hired. Do you remember what that word was? What everyone talked about, what he was going to bring to the team.
Accountability, right?
Accountability, correct. Do you feel like by not really going into, but for lack of a better word, not laying into the stars, is that a lack of accountability on his end to do that? Or do you think that's him being a good coach, just trying to protect his team, but behind the scenes, he's definitely having those conversations?
I think the big thing for me is him kind of realizing in the past what he used to do maybe isn't the right method anymore. Remember when he was with the with the Blues, he had no problem calling out players, specific players.
Yeah, Jordan Kyrou.
Right. Yeah, Jordan Kyrou was the big,
specifically Jordan Kyrou.
Jordan Kyrou, for some reason, you were there in the coach's crosshairs, and you were never getting out.
He was Leafs Nation's Justin Hall for some reason. But yes.
Yeah, Justin Hall, Jake Gardner, we could throw all the different names into it. And for me, I think this is a coach realizing the market he's in. When we talk about the Toronto market, if Craig were to say, Mitch Marner didn't really do much in terms of shooting the puck after I told him to shoot the puck, guess what people are going to be talking about? Because Craig Berube literally said he wants Mitch Marner back, but he can't then go and say, but Mitch didn't do this. Like, be a little contradictory of himself. Like, I just think he's understanding. Don't add any fuel to the fire. Like I think that's what he was doing in that moment, because I'm sure you saw it on the bench. We all saw it on the bench in that second period. I thought he was going to take a hockey stick and smack somebody over the head with it. Like, that's where it looked like it was getting to with Craig Berube.
Yeah.
So, like, it's hard. I think for him, it's like he put it on the whole group rather than trying to point to something specific. That's what.
And I just wonder if that's helping at all. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. We talk all the time when Keefe was here how the core four was coddled, and and then finally in the final year Keefe was around, he started to kind of call out the big boys whenever he felt necessary, I guess. So I think maybe I just expected Berube to do it a little more, especially publicly, and it just didn't really happen a whole lot. And I don't, again, like, I'm not trying to make a thing out of this. It was just something that popped into my mind. Like, is that a bit of a lack of it? Like, did he hold the players as accountable as you thought? I suppose is my answer.
Media, no, he didn't. In the media, he didn't, but I don't think that's where he wanted to do it. I think
yeah. Go ahead.
I think he felt probably it was best to keep it out of the media, but I also think there's opportunity there for him to say, "Oh, Austin thought there were guys who were passengers." Also, I don't know if it happened before. I may probably happen after, so maybe that's why the question. I would have posed the question. Well, Austin Matthews, your captain, said there was guys who were passengers.
Well, they did ask the post game. The post game, they did ask about that.
They did, and what I can't remember what he said about it.
I think he just kind of brushed off and probably said,
to me, that's one where I'm like, well, he could have easily in that moment said, well, yeah, some of our top guys were definitely passengers out there. He could have said something like that.
Their best players are better than our best players. Actually, remember when Keefe did that earlier this year in New Jersey? When who was it? It was a defenseman. He came from Montreal. What was his name?
Oh,
not Siegenthaler. He was an old Habs defenseman.
Kovacevic.
Yeah, Jonathan Kovacevic. Yeah. Remember he came out and he was like, "Yeah, like we got to be better. Like we can't be turning the puck over."
He said the team needs a playoff mentality down the stretch, and Keefe's like, "Well, Kovacevic just needs to play better."
Yeah, he just needs to play better. Yeah, just straight up called him right out. I appreciated that, to be honest with you. Not that I don't know. Did you want to hear that from Berube, where he's obviously after Game 7, it's not going to help you because then you got to fester on that all off season. But it just didn't feel like we ever got that, where it was ever one of those two. Like, it's like, well, Austin's got to play better, or well, Mitch has to play better, or Willie's got to play better. It just seemed like, I don't know. It seemed as though almost that they're trying so hard to break the core four mentality that he always addressed it as a group, when sometimes it was maybe more so warranted to attack those players, or not attack, but to call out those players, to hold those specific players accountable. Like for me, I think game 5, I want to say, was it game 5 or one of the games against Ottawa, where the core four was horrendous, but the rest of the team actually was very good. Fourth line scored, third line scored, but it was the core four. And I remember the question was, do these guys have to play better? And he's like, the whole team has to play better. We're a team. It's not just those guys. Yeah. And I remember I came out, I'm like, no, I don't buy that, because the rest of the team did do their job. And those guys didn't. Their job is to score and provide that offense. And they got enough out of their blue line. They got enough from their depth, but it was the big boys that didn't perform. And that would have been the difference. And I remember not liking those comments. And that would have been an example or a time of when maybe he should have, kind of came at them a little bit. But anyways, kind of went off topic for a moment there. But yeah, I do recall, like, one of the quotes, I guess, from Berube, when we were talking about how the structure was very important, and he basically blamed what happened in game 5 and 7 on that lack of structure, those quick blips. Like he said, structure is very important. If you lose structure, you can if you lose structure, you can get by with having without having your A game. But we lost our structure for a bit in the second period, and they capitalized, and it cost us 3 goals. So that was in reference to Game 7, obviously, when Florida scored 3 goals within 6 minutes, and that was the hockey game. But he was also asked, I thought it was a good question. I think it was Pierre LeBrun that asked him this, and he said, "Hey, you've been with this team for a year now. You obviously have won a Stanley Cup. What does this team need to do moving forward to get to the level that your Blues did in 2019?" And that was a very good question. And essentially, he said this is a very good team. Like, talent-wise, he believes that they're there. Like, he liked the team. He thought it was a good team. And essentially, what I gathered from his answer was that structure just needs to be more consistent, right? That's what makes teams great. You look at Florida, you look at Carolina, they always play well structured. Like, you rarely see breakdowns from those teams. They're always playing with structure, and it allows them, as he said, when you play with your structure, if you don't lose it, you can get by without your A game. But when you don't have structure, you got to outscore your problems. And when you don't have your A game, you're not finishing, you're not scoring, your big boys, aren't putting pucks in the back of the net, you have no chance in hell. And that ultimately was the problem. So consistently playing with that structure, that's the next step for this group, and finding a way to do that and buy in and get it done. That seems to be what Berube believes is the difference between the Leafs and champions, right? That's what's holding them back, is the inability to play a full 60 minutes to keep that structure. Because when they did in Game 6, what happened, Dave? They won the freaking hockey game 2-0, right? They beat the defending Stanley Cup champions. When they play with good structure, good things happen. But when they don't, it's sayonara. So I think he's correct in that regard. And I also wonder if he believes that, like truly believes that, does he maybe believe that the group as constructed could get it done at some point if they just buy in? And I'm obviously looking at Mitch Marner and John Tavares, because one other thing that most people picked up on, he was asked point blank, do you want to see Mitch and John back? And he said 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, again, was a coach's speech? Maybe. But he asked a lot of them this year. And outside of, games 5 and 7, they usually did come through for him. Right. But the issue is there's been 8 years prior to this of failure. And I'm just not sure the people at the top will be willing to give them another shot. Berube might be, but I don't know if the people at the top and the fan base will.
The big one here too is he talks about he was asked kind of like what does he want to see from the team kind of in the offseason on top of that. He's like, for me, the takeaway is, yeah, it hurts right now. It hurts. Remember that this summer, because it hurts and it takes a lot to win this league. From what we talked about with injuries, how you have to plan, all that. You got to go home in the summer, become tougher, because you're going to need it for next year. And like when I hear structure and being tougher, it means that when the pressure is dialed up, when the intensity is dialed up, you have to match it. Because if you don't, if you play timid and play outside of what you're supposed to do, you're going to lose. And I think there was like a kind of underlying message in that. He's probably going to tell a few of these guys, you can't, I want to say turtle, but you can't become a shell of yourself because it gets harder. You have to find a way to push through when it is tougher.
Yeah, exactly. Find a way to get your game back. And it felt like they did, and that's what also is just perplexing about the Game 7 loss is they started out so poorly, right? Shot attempts were 25-0 to start that game. And then the Leafs finally got to their game. They found their structure, and then they started to be on the attack for in the last 10 minutes of the game. And you're thinking, all right, if you can just carry that over, you weather that early storm, that push from Florida, now you have the momentum, right, coming out of that period. You got it going in the back half. You know what you need to do. Just continue that moving forward. And then they started out the second period so flat, and Florida started to turn the tables again, and then they weren't able to find it. Structure was gone, and within a 6-minute span, Florida scores 3, and season was over at that point. So Toronto, yeah, they just got to find a way to match that and get to their game quicker and stick to their game for the entirety of it, not just for a 10-minute stretch. Got to stick to it and match and elevate the energy from what the team's giving you on the other side, which they clearly did not do in game five.
Look what Florida did in game 1 against Carolina.
Yeah, right away they're up 2-0. Quick, real quick.
They won right after. Like Carolina was probably like, "Oh, we've had a few days to get ourselves ready for this. Florida's hurting. Had guys not take practice and warm up.
Yeah.
But Florida's just like, we're coming at you, and we're gonna make you kind of lose your structure because we know that Carolina does not want to be fall behind in a game, right? So I think that to me was kind of the biggest indicator of when you stick to the game plan, when you do what your coach tells you to do, good things are going to happen. And so I think that's, if there's ever a time to really believe that, just look at what Florida did, not just in your series, what they did in that first game against Carolina.
I will say, based off this conversation, in about 20 years when Berube's done and he's finished coaching, he's chilling somewhere on a beach and I run into him, maybe we're on a cruise together somewhere and I run into him having a beer, I'd love to ask him, like, candidly, what was going through your mind in game 5 when Mitch Marner made that spinorama backhand sauce pass up the middle that led to the third goal of that game that really sunk you guys? I would love to know his thoughts and what was running through his mind at that point, because I can assure you, I don't think it was good things. It certainly was not good things. So we're kind of running out of time here. I thought it was interesting. He was asked about Matthews' leadership, and he essentially talked about how he felt that Matthews became a better leader as the year went on. He took big steps in that role. Maybe it's more so in the room than on the ice, perhaps. And the injury was a big reason for why he struggled this year. I think a lot of people, should know that and should understand that. He's not a 30-goal scorer. He's just not. Like, this is literally the lowest amount of goals he's ever scored in his career. Like, going back to his rookie season as an 18-year-old, going back to, half lockout years, COVID years, he's never scored less goals than he did this season. Like, this was literally his worst year of his entire career, and he didn't just lose his skill. No. He didn't lose it.
This is what you call an outlier season, not 2 seasons where he has scored 60 and 69 goals, like, or over 60. Like, he's a 2-time 60-plus goal scorer. He has scored 40 at ease, even when he was hurt or injured. Yeah. This is an outlier season, so I want to see, can he, like, obviously I think for Berube, when he talks about toughness, he's probably going to tell Matthews, yes, get your injury sorted out. Find a way to also come back stronger so that,
this doesn't happen again. We need you at 100%. Need him at 100% because he's a different player. When he's 100%, he's a top 5, can be a top 5 player in the league. When he's not, he's still good. He's still great, but he's not the difference maker Toronto needs him to be to get to where they want to go. I think that's ultimately it. And hopefully he can have himself a good summer. No surgery, so he will be able to work out. We'll be able to rehab skate the whole 9 and get himself prepared for next year, where he's going to be chomping at the bit to have a much better season. And whether that's with Mitch and John with him remains to be seen. Again, conversations for us to have over the next couple of weeks. William Nylander off to the World Championships as per usual to go and link up with Team Sweden. So they get their Eric Lindros back as they try and do some damage overseas. So we'll update you if Willie ends up doing anything while he's over there. Canada playing pretty well at the World Championship so far. Maybe we can get into that a little bit tomorrow. It's been heavy Leafs all week, but it's for a reason. Tomorrow we should hear possibly what this meeting with Brendan Shanahan and MLSE is all about and what comes of it. So we'll come back and we'll dissect what we're hearing, what the insiders are hearing on today's big time sit down with Brendan Shanahan and the board at MLSE. But that'll do it for us here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on Twitter at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti, and follow the show as well at Locked On Leafs. We'll be back with another episode for you guys tomorrow. But until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.